Hello everyone, welcome to my next Star Wars review. As I stated in the previous video, I apologize for my wardrobe, but I'm currently doing my laundry and this is pretty much all I have at this point, so I apologize again, but you'll have to put up with a lower class version of me for this video. And actually, the star of today's story would probably not approve of my apparel. Who knows? He's quite a proper guy. And with that, I guess I'll just jump right into it. With today's review, I'll actually be covering two aspects of Star Wars stories that I've never covered before. One, I will be reviewing an item that came from the new timeline as recognized by Disney. So this story is still recognized as canon. It came out this year and was not part of the original expanded universe, what is now known as the Legends timeline. So I'm actually going to be covering something that falls within something that is still canon and what is recognized as canon by Disney today. I will also, for the first time ever, be reviewing a comic book. Now, with that, I remind you all that I am not Linkara, and I have never reviewed a comic book before, so please be gentle. If this doesn't work out as a comic book review, I apologize. Let me just get that out of the way. Okay. And with that, let's get started. What I'll be reviewing today is C-3PO, The Phantom Limb, a story that came out this year, and one that generated some buzz when it came out. I was actually really surprised to see how many people recommended to me. It's like, dude, you need to read the C-3PO comic. It's amazing. And I guess I'll start off by talking about the character of C-3PO himself, because I've talked to a lot of Star Wars fans that hate him, like really despise him as a character. And I've heard that that goes all the way back to when the original movie came out, that even with the popularity of the film, he was the most hated character by the adult fans. I was born in 1985, so long after, like almost a decade after the original film came out. So I'm basing that off of what I've heard, what I've read, and just complete hearsay. But that's what I've heard, and that's why in Empire Strikes Back, C-3PO gets abused so much, both by Han Solo and then at the end of the film when he gets blown to bits. The reason for that is because it's kind of like the filmmakers were going for some kind of a catharsis where the audience could get to watch C-3PO get tortured the entire time. My personal take, I always liked C-3PO as a character. I mean, yeah, he's a little whiny and everything, but there was just something about him, especially in the original film. This prim and proper, kind of stuck up, little servant, butler, almost, that was so nice to his human masters like Luke, yet could be so mean and cruel to R2-D2, and actually him and R2-D2 is one of the great relationships in all of Star Wars. I mean, you can't think of one without thinking of the other, and actually, this particular comic doesn't have R2-D2 in it, and it almost feels wrong for R2-D2 not to be paired with C-3PO, and one of the most jarring aspects of Empire, to the film's credit, is not only separating Luke from the rest of the group, but separating R2 from 3PO. Again, it almost feels wrong, but it works for the film. But yeah, I always liked C-3PO, and again, maybe there's something to the fact that I first saw him when I was a kid, and that's why I like him. I've heard some people say that about Jar Jar Binks. It's like, look, yeah, I know everybody says he's annoying, but I first saw that movie when I was 5, and I was completely fine with Jar Jar. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Maybe there's something to that. But C-3PO as a character never really bothered me until you get to the prequels, and he's doing slapstick in the droid factory and all that other stuff. But there were a multitude of problems with the prequels. So, I mean, nobody came out of that smelling like a rose. But yeah, I always liked C-3PO. Now, did I ever think he was strong enough to hold his own story? Not really. To me, he was always kind of a side character. I always kind of looked at him like he's an important character, especially, like I said, in the original film. But he's no Luke, and he's no Han Solo, and he's no Princess Leia. And actually, I remember watching the Droids cartoon when I was a kid, and for those of you who don't remember or aren't aware, there were 2 Star Wars animated series in the 1980s. There was the more infamous Ewoks cartoon and Star Wars Droids, which starred C-3PO and R2-D2. And to be perfectly honest, the Ewoks cartoon has the more dubious reputation. I honestly think the Droids cartoon is worse. I'm not saying either show is good, but the Droids cartoon, I remember being full of bad slapstick and was just really bad. It was just really, really bad, if I recall. And the Ewoks cartoon at least had Morag the Tolga Witch, who, if you don't remember Morag the Tolga Witch, she's basically a female Mumra and kind of cool. So at least the show had a cool villain. But in any case, so yeah, I always kind of saw C-3PO as a side character. I always loved the design of him. Again, I'm sure the robot from Metropolis was a huge influence on C-3PO's design. And I always loved how much personality Anthony Daniels was able to get out of the suit and the voice that he provided to C-3PO. It's one of the reasons that I appreciate practical effects in suit acting. It's one of the reasons I'm a Godzilla fan. There's just something that an actor in a suit is able to bring to life in the creature that you can't always get out of a CGI character. And C-3PO is this stiff robot that can barely move his arms, has no facial expressions, and yet he's got like this personality to him that really shines through all of that. And that's something that I always appreciated about C-3PO. It's the same thing with R2-D2. I mean, it's just it's a garbage can on wheels, and yet somehow you think of R2-D2 as having this feisty personality. And that's tougher to do than people realize, and I always appreciated that about both characters. And but again, to make my point, I never saw C-3PO as a starring character. To me, he was always, a side character and very good at that. But so when I heard, knowing that a lot of people don't like C-3PO and knowing my own personal opinions that he probably shouldn't work as a main character, I was really surprised to see people so, buzzing about this comic and telling me how good it was. And this is also the cynical nature of me coming out. When The Force Awakens came out, and this came out before the movie did, when I saw that C-3PO had a red arm, to me, I just kind of, jokingly rolled my eyes, and it was like, yeah, they need to sell more toys. Because you can't sell C-3PO toys with the Force Awakens banner on it and have it look exactly the same as he did in 1977. You got to make him look different so you can sell all new toys. So that's why he has the red arm. And to me, that's all there was to it. And that's all the thought. It's like, look, they painted his arm red for the merch and no other reason. So to see this story explaining how he got the red arm, how he lost his original arm, was something I was a little kind of skeptical about. I'm like, yeah, whatever. He gets a red arm at the end. Who cares? But much to my surprise, first of all, the artwork is very good. I want to see, where was the page? See, again, I'm not the best comic book reviewer, so bear with me. It's a story that stars C-3PO on a mission with a group of droids in the Resistance. So this story takes place during the time of the conflict of the Resistance of the First Order, as you see in The Force Awakens. R2-D2 is not present in the story, I'm assuming, because at this point he's shut down, waiting for Rey to wake him up, and so he can give the other half of the map to Luke. But as you can see here with the artwork, it's very good. I particularly like this one panel that has all the droids and shows them all. I guess my only real knock on the comic is that their introduction of the droids individually is a little bit like an assembly line, kind of like, buy this toy type of way, where they just kind of say each other's names and their function and their personality. And that felt very forced as far as exposition goes. But as the story progresses, they find themselves lost on this planet that's like a barren wasteland with all these dangerous monsters running around. They've taken a First Order droid, a protocol droid named Omri. They've taken him prisoner because he knows the location of where Admiral Akbar has been held captive, to which I'm like, wait a minute, Admiral Akbar's been held captive? What's going on? I hope they save him. It's like, oh wait, he's in The Force Awakens. Okay, he's fine, never mind. So unimportant. That whole storyline of Admiral Akbar being kidnapped is completely unimportant. It's really just, Omri is basically just holding the MacGuffin, and it could be anything. It doesn't really matter what it is. But yeah, all these droids find themselves together with the First Order prisoner, and they have to make it through this barren wasteland to try and signal the Resistance to come pick them up. And along the way, Omri and C-3PO, let me see if I can pull up a good panel of it. Again, I probably should have scripted this out, like Linkara does. But anyway, yeah, you see situations like this where C-3PO and Omri will talk to each other, and they talk very much about the nature of what it is to be a droid in the Star Wars universe, which has always fascinated me, because as a kid, I always thought it was weird. C-3PO and R2-D2 as kids we think of them as real, and we think of them as real people and real characters, even though they're basically just machines. And that's very much how many of the characters in the Star Wars universe view them. Han Solo views C-3PO as an annoyance who's just there to spout information when he needs it. Luke Skywalker, who is probably the nicest to them, kind of views them as like, at first at least, he kind of views them as like tools on the farm. And ultimately, he forms more of a bond with R2. But basically, droids aren't treated with much respect. And actually, in the original film, when the bartender shoos them away, we don't serve their kind here. That was always fascinating to me because I was like, why are they not letting C-3PO and R2-D2 go to the bar? I mean, they're people in this universe, like everybody. A very diverse universe, I might add, in Star Wars. So it always felt weird to me. But again, it's kind of like a very clever way to kind of teach kids about racism and stuff like it. And I guess from the mind of a child, it's kind of silly because we view, as kids, we all viewed C-3PO as being a real person, so it felt silly to abuse him so much. And that was always very fascinating to me. But this comic kind of takes it to a whole nother level where Omri and C-3PO kind of debate over their place in the universe, and Omri brings up all these points. It's like, look, I might have been a I might have been a resistance droid at one point. I might have been for the other side, and I just got taken by the other side. They wiped my memory and reprogrammed me. And that's kind of, there's this tragic element to C-3PO that's brought up here where at the end of the prequel trilogy, his mind gets erased. Not R2-D2's, which kind of felt cruel, but okay. But his mind gets wiped, his memory erased, and he basically starts from scratch all over again. And in the comic, they bring up that he has flashes of memories from those lost days where it's like, yeah, I kind of remember being in a droid factory, and I kind of remember being attached to the body of a different droid and having a body that's not my own and all that other stuff, but he can't remember it because his memory gets taken away from him. And there's just this, this whole idea that are droids people? Are they really like alive in this universe, or are they just tools that, are allowed to be whatever their human programmers allow them to be? And C-3PO kind of takes the stance he's just happy to serve his masters, whereas Omri seems to be a little bit more jaded and, just kind of nihilistic about the whole thing. But along the way, the droids get picked off one by one as each monster and all these different swarms of beasts kind of pick them off all one by one. And it's a very perilous journey for them because you look at C-3PO and you look at protocol droids in general, and they have no weapons, they have no fighting skills. It's not what they're programmed for, and it's not what they're capable of doing. So, I mean, they're pretty fucked. I mean, you think, you're looking at it, right? And there's a lot of drama attached to that, even though C-3PO is going to make it because of how The Force Awakens plays out. But still, it's something, it is very interesting to see a completely powerless protagonist and all these droids just trying to make it together throughout this entire thing. And reading this comic, I was like, man, I'd like to see this as like a mini movie or something, like a short, like a half-hour short or something like that, because I think it would work quite well. But inevitably you do get to the point where C-3PO does lose his arm. And again, if you watch The Force Awakens, you know that moment is coming, because that's kind of the whole point of this comic, is to show how C-3PO loses his arm. And again, I don't know how well you can see that there. Again, not Linkara, bear with me. And it is actually kind of a jarring moment when he does lose his arm and everything. And I won't spoil the ending for anybody, because again, I highly recommend checking this out. I'm sure you can get it on digital download, like pretty much anything else. If you can get a copy of the comic, that's fine too. All well and good. But honestly, I was really surprised at how good this was. And again, it's not this action-packed adventure that you expect Star Wars to be, even though there are, I guess you could say, action sequences in it. But really, it's more of a character piece where you just get to see C-3PO in this situation, in this environment, work together with his fellow droids, and even make friends with a droid from the other side. And really, for something that's very simple, just trying to fill a gap left behind by The Force Awakens, the story was actually quite good, and I was really impressed with it. And I'm glad they didn't try to like stretch it out and make it a 5-part series or like a 15-issue C-3PO series or anything like that. They just made the one issue to fill a gap in the story, and as a standalone story, it works quite well. And again, it's centered on a character that I never imagined would ever work as being the protagonist of a Star Wars story. So kudos to whoever put this thing together. Really an interesting idea, and it's something that could have easily been like an unremarkable write-off and just something that they threw out there just because they knew people would buy it, just because. And ultimately, it turned out quite well. So yeah. Again, I'm not the best at reviewing comic books or anything like that, but if you're looking for a good Star Wars story, I say check out C-3PO The Phantom Limb. It's quite good. So that will conclude this review for this episode, but next month I will be back once again with another Star Wars review, but until then, I will see you all later.